There is a picture in your head of a man on a balcony with a stringed instrument, watching a city burn and enjoying it. I'm Vera, and this is Echoes of History Past. The instrument in that picture hadn't been invented yet, and the story it belongs to is the least interesting thing that happened that summer. Because the Great Fire of Rome broke out in July of 64 AD, and the part nobody searches for is what came after the smoke cleared. Not a song, a law, a set of rules about street widths and stone and how tall a building was allowed to be, written under emergency conditions, and still, in its logic, sitting in the building code that governs the room you are in right now. To understand the law, you have to understand why the fire moved the way it did. Rome before that summer was not the marble postcard. It was a maze, streets that wandered rather than ran, houses shouldered against each other with no gap between them, upper floors built out in timber and leaning toward the buildings opposite until the sky was a thin strip overhead. Every alley was a chimney waiting for a reason. So when it caught, it didn't spread so much as pour. It ran downhill through the crowded quarters, jumped the narrow lanes as if they were nothing, and doubled back on districts that thought they had survived. When the flames finally went out, whole regions of the capital were gone, and the people standing in the ash were already saying the emperor had wanted it. The Senate believed it. The crowds believed it. And Nero, whatever else he was, understood that a ruined city is a political problem before it is an architectural one. He needed Rome rebuilt fast, and he needed it rebuilt in a way that could never burn like that again. Here's the reframe. The men who did that work have almost no biography at all. Tacitus, writing about 50 years later as a senator with no love for Nero, gives us two names, Severus and Celer, architect and engineer. That is nearly the whole of what history holds on them. No birthplace we can trust, no other commission we can point to, no ending. They are known for the emperor's spectacular vanity project, the vast pleasure palace rising among gardens and an artificial lake on the cleared ground. But in the same weeks that they were laying out that palace, they were doing the other job, the unglamorous one, turning a catastrophe into measurements. And the measurements are astonishing because they read like a modern fire safety review. Streets were to be widened so that flame could not simply step across. Buildings were given a height limit because height without limit is what turned lanes into furnaces. Ground floors and lower structures were to be built of stone that would not take fire rather than the timber that had fed it. And along the front of the new housing blocks, colonnades. Rows of freestanding stone columns and porticos, which everyone remembers as decoration and which were, in function, a firebreak with a roof on it, a stone barrier between the street and the dwelling, and a platform from which men could fight a blaze from above. This is what makes it the first recorded building code we have. Not advice, not custom. An imperial decree enforceable across an entire capital that told private builders what material they must use, how far apart they must stand, and how high they were permitted to go because the previous arrangement had killed people. That is the connection, and it is a straight one. Every fire code since has been written the same way, after the fact, in ash, by people counting what burned and asking which physical condition allowed it. Separation. Non-combustible material, height restriction, access for the men who fight it. The vocabulary changed. The four ideas did not. Nero was dead within a handful of years, remembered by a slander about music he probably never played. The palace was buried by his successors deliberately, as if to erase him from the ground itself. The rules outlasted all of it. So the most durable thing a hated emperor ever ordered was not a palace or a statue. It was a set of dull, precise instructions about stone and distance, drafted by two men whose lives are a single line in someone else's book. So who really deserves the credit here? The emperor who signed it, or the two anonymous architects who worked out the numbers? Argue it below. I'll be here tomorrow with another story where the famous version got the wrong man entirely.